The hydraulic hiss of the pressure valve was the only sound in the subterranean corridor. A rhythmic, mechanical exhale that marked time in a place where day and night were obsolete concepts. Jaden Rourke wiped a smear of grease from his forehead, leaving a dark streak against his pale skin. He stared at the readout on his wrist gauntlet, waiting for the numbers to stabilize. The Trellick 7 mining colony was a rusting tomb floating on the edge of the Perseus Arm, a place where machinery went to die and people went to be forgotten. Jaden fits both categories perfectly. He tapped the display. The primary cooling coupling for Sector 4 was holding steady at 80% efficiency. It should have been 40. Yesterday, the manifold had cracked, leaking coolant like a severed artery. He had logged the repair ticket, intending to fix it after his sleep cycle. But when he arrived 20 minutes ago with his heavy toolkit, the crack was sealed. It was not just patched, it was fused with a weld so precise it looked like the original molecular bonding of the alloy. Jaden frowned, running his gloved thumb over the smooth metal surface. No maintenance drone on this station was capable of that level of finesse. The drones here were lobotomized flying trash cans that banged into walls and welded things crooked. Mila ran a diagnostic on maintenance logs for the last 12 hours, Jaden said into the comms unit in his ear. The artificial intelligence's voice was flat, synthesized, and utterly devoid of personality. Scanning. No maintenance activity recorded in Sector 4 since your last shift. Technician Rourke. Jaden stood up, his joints popping. He was 32 years old, but the station gravity and the endless shifts made him feel 50. He looked down the long, dimly lit corridor. Steam vented from floor grates, obscuring the far end in a haze of gray fog. "You are lying to me." "Mila," Jaden muttered, holstering his laser torch. "Or the station is fixing itself. The possibility of spontaneous regeneration in Durasteel alloy is 0. Mila replied. "Perhaps you performed the repair during a period of sleep deprivation and failed to log it." Jaden let out a short, humorless laugh. He was tired. Yes, he had been tired for 3 years, but he did not sleepwalk through molecular welding. He gathered his tools, slinging the heavy bag over his shoulder. The weight was familiar, a grounding force in a life that had become untethered. He began the long walk back to the lift, his magnetic boots clanking against the deck plates. This was the 3rd time this week. On Tuesday, a fried circuit board in the hydroponics bay had bypassed itself with a copper filament that was twisted into a perfect spiral. On Thursday, the erratic ventilation in his quarters, which had rattled for 6 months, suddenly began purring like a luxury liner's climate control. He reached the lift and punched the button for the habitation deck. The doors slid open with a grinding protest. As he stepped inside, he caught a flicker of movement in his peripheral vision. He spun around, his hand instinctively dropping to the heavy wrench on his belt. The corridor was empty, just the steam, the shadows, and the flickering lumens overhead. He held his breath, listening. For a second, he thought he heard the softest whisper of fabric against metal, a sound so faint it might have been the circulation fans. "I am losing it," he whispered to the empty car. Space madness, the final frontier of boredom. The doors closed, sealing him in. His quarters were a testament to a life lived in transit, a bunk, a table, a nutrient dispenser that produced gray sludge, and a wall of monitors. This was his sanctuary and his prison. Jaden threw his bag into the corner and sat at the terminal. He pulled up the internal security feeds. This had become his ritual. Every night, he scanned the footage, looking for whatever guardian angel or gremlin was doing his job for him. He told himself it was professional curiosity, But deep down, it was paranoia. Old habits died hard, and the military had trained him to look for patterns in the noise. He watched the grainy feed of Sector 4. He fast-forwarded through hours of stillness. Then, the camera glitched. It was a subtle distortion, a wave of static that rolled across the screen for 3 seconds. When the image cleared, the cooling coupling was fixed. Jaden leaned forward, rewinding the footage. He played it frame by frame, just before the static. There was a blur, a shadow that did not match the lighting angles. It moved with a fluidity that was impossible for a human in heavy vacuum gear. It was fast, predatory, and silent. He sat back, rubbing his eyes. He took a long pull from a flask of cheap synthetic whiskey he kept on the desk. The burn was unpleasant, but it cleared the dust from his throat. "Ghosts," he said aloud. "I have got a ghost with a welding torch." He closed his eyes, and the image of the blur shifted in his mind, transforming into the memories he tried to drown with the whiskey. He saw the sterile white walls of the military tribunal. He heard the drone of the prosecutor reading the charges: insubordination, failure to follow direct orders during a combat scenario, conduct unbecoming of a systems lieutenant. They had stripped him of his rank. They had taken his pension. They had kicked him out onto the street because he had refused to overload the reactor of a civilian transport ship that the brass claimed was carrying insurgents. He had looked at the sensor data. He had seen the biosigns. There were children on that ship. He had refused to push the button. Someone else had done it 5 minutes later. But Jaden Rourke had walked away with his soul intact, even if his career was incinerated. Now he was here, on a rock in the middle of nowhere, fixing toilets and cooling ducts while shadows danced in the corners of his vision. A proximity alarm blared on his console, snapping him back to the present. "Environmental warning," Mila announced. "Seismic instability detected in Refinery B. Methane pockets venting. Evacuation protocols initiated." Jaden swore, grabbing his bag. Refinery B was the heart of the operation. If that went up, the whole colony would be a debris field. Refinery B was a cavernous hellscape of noise and heat. Massive drills bored into the planet's crust, shaking the floor plates with every rotation. The air was thick with the smell of ozone and unrefined ore. Sirens wailed, bathing the vast chamber in pulsing red light. Jaden sprinted along the catwalk, his respirator mask clamped over his face. The automated fire suppression systems were failing. Jets of blue flame erupted from ruptured pipes below, licking at the support beams. "Mila, give me a route to the main shutoff valve," Jaden yelled over the roar of the machinery. "Walkway 3 is compromised," Mila responded. "Structural integrity is critical. Rerouting. Take the service ladder to level 2. Jaden slid down the ladder, his gloves smoking from the friction. He hit the deck running. The heat was intense, triggering the thermal alarms in his suit. He could see the main valve ahead, a massive wheel painted yellow. It was surrounded by a cloud of venting gas. He reached the valve and gripped the wheel. It was scalding hot. He gritted his teeth and hauled it. It would not budge. The pressure lock had engaged. "Override!" Jaden screamed. "Mila, override the safety lock." "I cannot comply," Mila said. "The sensors indicate a 90% probability of explosion if the pressure is released too quickly." "If I do not release it, the probability is 100%, Jaden shouted. He braced his boots against the railing and pulled with everything he had. His muscles screamed. The metal groaned. Suddenly, the catwalk beneath him shuddered violently. A support beam 20 feet away sheared off, falling into the grinding gears below. The entire platform tilted. Jaden lost his footing. He slid toward the edge, his fingers scrambling for purchase on the slick grating. He went over the side, catching the bottom rail with one hand. He dangled there, 500 feet above the crushing teeth of the ore processors. The heat rising from the pit was unbearable. His grip began to slip. I am going to die in a mine, he thought, a strange calm washing over him. Of all the ways to go. The metal rail creaked. His sweaty glove slid another inch. He looked down, accepting the fall. Then, a hand grabbed his wrist. It was not a robotic clamp. It was a hand, encased in a gauntlet that felt like warm, polished stone. The grip was ironclad, immovable. Jaden looked up. The figure crouching on the tilted catwalk was shrouded in a cloak that seemed to absorb the red emergency lights, shifting in color like oil on water. A hood obscured the face, but beneath the hem, he saw armor that glowed with a faint, golden luminescence, with a heave that defied physics. The figure pulled him up. Jaden flew over the rail and landed hard on the grating. He scrambled back, gasping for air. The figure stood over him. For a split second, a vent of steam blew the hood back. Jaden froze. He saw skin that shimmered with an opalescent sheen, like moonlight caught in pearls. He saw eyes that were not human, large, slanted, and glowing with a fierce, violet intensity. They were eyes that held ancient starlight. A piece of debris plummeted from the ceiling, aiming straight for them. The figure moved faster than thought. A blade of pure liquid light snapped into existence from a bracer on the figure's wrist. With a single fluid arc, the alien sliced the falling girder in half. The molten ends clattered harmlessly to the side. The figure looked at Jaden one last time, a gaze that felt like it scanned his molecular structure, and then turned. "Wait!" Jaden yelled, reaching out. The figure sprinted toward the far wall, leaping across a 30-foot gap in the catwalks with the grace of a jungle predator. In seconds, the intruder vanished into the maintenance shadows. The main valve behind Jaden hissed. The wheel spun on its own, guided by an invisible force or a remote hack, and the pressure vented safely. The sirens died down to a dull hum. Jaden sat on the hot metal grating, staring at the spot where the alien had stood. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He looked at his wrist, where the bruise from the grip was already forming. "That was not a ghost," he whispered. The next 3 days were a blur of obsession. Jaden did not sleep. He pored over the station's schematics, mapping every ventilation shaft, every forgotten service tunnel, every blind spot in the security grid. He built an algorithm to track power fluctuations that matched the signature of the cloaked figure's armor. He was not crazy. He had felt the grip. He had seen the light blade. He started setting traps, not to hurt, but to communicate. He left military-grade ration packs in the crawl spaces of Sector 4. He left a thermos of hot coffee near the thermal exhaust port of the reactor. He left notes written on plas paper. "Who are you? Why did you save me? I am not reporting this. I just want to know." The food disappeared. The coffee was drunk. The notes were gone. But there was never a reply. The unseen presence became a weight on his shoulders. He felt eyes on him constantly, when he showered, when he ate, when he worked. It was not a menacing feeling, exactly, though it was a heavy, intense scrutiny. It felt like being studied under a microscope by something that could crush the slide at any moment. Jaden's sarcasm, usually his shield, began to crack. He found himself talking to the empty air. "I know you are there," he would say while calibrating a sensor array. "You might as well come out. I have seen your eyes. You are not from around here." Nothing but the hum of the station answered him. On the 4th night, the paranoia peaked. He was in his quarters, dismantling a drone servo on his workbench. The silence of the room was oppressive. He had rigged a primitive motion sensor near his door, bypassing Mila's system so the AI would not alert security. He was tightening a micro screw when the sensor on his desk blinked. Once. Twice. Green light. Someone was right outside his door. Jaden stopped breathing. He slowly set the screwdriver down. He did not reach for a weapon. If this thing could slice a steel girder in half, a wrench would not do much. He turned his chair around to face the door. "Come in," he said, his voice steady. The door did not slide open. Instead, the locking mechanism clicked, disengaging from the inside. The heavy metal slab slid back. She stood there. The cloak was gone, draped over one arm. She wore armor that looked like it had been forged from gold and ceramic, fitting her form like a second skin. It was etched with intricate swirling patterns that pulsed with a faint rhythm. Her skin was the color of starlight on snow, iridescent and flawless. Her hair was a cascade of liquid silver falling to her waist. But it was her presence that filled the room. She radiated a power that made the air taste metallic. She was tall, taller than him, with a regal bearing that made the cramped quarters feel like a throne room. She stepped inside. The door slid shut behind her. Jaden stood up slowly. Up close, she was breathtaking and terrifying, those violet eyes locked onto his, unblinking. There was no hostility in them, but there was a profound, ancient sadness. "You are the one from the refinery," Jaden stated. It was not a question. She nodded once. Her movement was precise, economical. "You are Alari," Jaden said, the realization hitting him from his old history lessons at the academy. The Alari Dominion, the empire that vanished 50 years ago. "I thought your kind was extinct, or a myth." "We are neither," she said. Her voice was melodic, vibrating with a harmonic undertone that seemed to resonate in his chest. It was a voice meant for commanding fleets, yet she spoke softly. Jaden leaned against his workbench, crossing his arms to hide the tremor in his hands. "So, an alien princess or warrior, judging by the sword, is living in the ventilation shafts of a garbage scow mining station. And she is fixing my plumbing." "I am Siratal," she said. "Okay, Siratal." Jaden gestured around the room. "Do you want to tell me why you are stalking me? I am just a grease monkey. I fix things. I drink bad whiskey. I am not exactly a person of interest." She took a step closer. The golden armor made no sound. The scent of ozone and exotic spices washed over him. "You are wrong. Jaden Rourke," she said. She knew his name. Of course she did. She probably knew his blood type and his favorite color by now. "I watched you," she continued. "I watched you fix the thermal couplers when the radiation levels were lethal, simply because you did not want the miners in the lower levels to suffer the heat. I watched you share your rations with the stray feline in the cargo bay. I watched you refuse to cut corners on the oxygen scrubbers, even though your commander ordered you to save credits." She paused, her gaze intensifying. "I have seen the way you look at the stars when you think no one is watching. You look at them like you are lost." Jaden swallowed hard. He felt exposed, flayed open by her words. "Look, lady, I do my job. That is all." "You do more than your job," Siratal said. "You carry a burden of honor in a galaxy that has forgotten the meaning of the word." She reached up and touched the clasp of her cloak, letting it fall to the floor. The liquid light blade hung at her hip, dormant but humming with potential energy. "But that is not why I am here," she said. Jaden narrowed his eyes. "Then why? Why show yourself now? You could have kept hiding. You could have left. I could not, she said. Because they have found us. Who? The ones who hunted my family to the edge of the universe, she replied. And now, they are hunting you. Jaden laughed, a dry, nervous sound. Me? Nobody is hunting me. The only people looking for me are credit collectors. Siratal reached into a pouch at her belt and pulled out a small, holographic projector. She set it on the table between them. It flickered to life, showing a complex double helix structure. It was DNA. This is your genetic sequence, she said. Okay, Jaden said. You stole my medical files. Creepy. But okay. Look closer, she commanded. She tapped the image. A section of the helix highlighted in red. It pulsed with a complex artificial rhythm. It looked less like biology and more like code written into flesh. What is that? Jaden asked. Leaning in. It is a seal, Siratal said. A biological encryption key. It was created by the bioarchitects of the Alari Dominion 3,000 years ago. It was designed to lock the royal succession line, to ensure that only the worthy could activate the throne core. Jaden looked at her, then at the hologram. What are you talking about? I was born in Ohio. My parents were dentists. The seed was planted in humanity long before your parents were born, Siratal explained. It has remained dormant, passed down through thousands of generations, hiding in the junk DNA of your species, waiting. Waiting for what? For the moment it was needed, she said. The Alari are dying. Jaden, my empire is dust. My people are scattered refugees. The royal bloodline was severed when my father fell. There is no one left who can interface with our technology. No one who can command the fleets or access the archives. She looked at him, and for the first time, her mask of regal calm slipped. He saw fear in her eyes. Fear, and a desperate, terrifying hope. Except you. Jaden backed away, hitting the wall. No. No way, this is insane, and you are telling me I am some kind of chosen one? That is a fairy tale. It is not magic, she said sharply. It is science, brutal, calculating science. You are the seed of continuance. You are the living key to the Alari throne. She stepped into his personal space. He could feel the heat radiating from her skin. And that is why I followed you. I intended to verify the genetic marker and then decide whether to eliminate the risk or... She stopped. Or what? Jaden whispered. Or kill me? I intended to ensure that the key did not fall into the hands of the warlords who destroyed my world, she said. If they capture you, they can force the succession. They can enslave the remnants of my people. They can restart a war that will burn a dozen systems. Jaden stared at the liquid light weapon at her hip. So, you are here to kill me. That is the truth. Siratal looked down at the weapon, then backed up at him. Her expression softened. It was a look of profound vulnerability that seemed out of place on a warrior's face. I watched you for weeks. Jaden, I saw your loneliness. I saw your kindness. I saw a man who sacrificed his own life to save a refinery full of strangers who do not even know his name. She reached out, her fingers hovering inches from his face. The air between them crackled with static electricity. I cannot kill you, she whispered, and I will not let them have you. Jaden's mind was racing. The self-repairing systems, the ghost, the feeling of being watched. It all spiraled down to this moment. He looked at the alien princess standing in his dirty, cramped quarters, offering him a destiny he did not want and a danger he could not comprehend. Who is them? Jaden asked. Siratal turned toward the door, her body tense. My father's betrayers, she said. The Vrakir. And they are not just looking anymore. They are here, as if on cue. A low thrumming sound vibrated through the floor plates. It was a sound Jaden knew well. It was the sound of unauthorized docking clamps latching onto the outer hull. Red alert sirens began to wail throughout the station. Mila's voice cut through the noise, urgent and loud. Security breach in Docking Bay 3. Unknown vessel attached. Hull integrity compromised. Armed intruders detected. Jaden looked at Siratal. She drew the hilt of her weapon. The blade ignited with a snap hiss, casting a brilliant silver-gold light that banished the shadows of the room. "I have followed you for weeks," she said, her voice fierce and final. "It is time you knew the truth. Now, pick up your tools. Jaden Rourke, we are leaving." Jaden looked at his wrench. He looked at the glowing sword. He looked at the woman who had just upended his entire existence. He grabbed his bag. "Lead the way." "Princess," he said. She smashed the control panel of the door with the pommel of her sword, locking it permanently, and then turned toward the ventilation grate on the far wall. With a kick, she knocked the grate loose. She looked back at him, extending a hand. "Run," she said. Jaden took her hand. It was warm. He followed her into the dark. The ventilation shaft was a claustrophobic nightmare of recycled air and vibrating metal, barely wide enough for a human to crawl through, let alone a human and an alien warrior in ceremonial armor. Jaden Rourke scrambled on his hands and knees, the grating of his knee pads against the galvanized steel echoing loudly in the confined space. Ahead of him, Siratal moved with a fluid, eerie silence, the golden bioluminescence of her undersuit casting long, dancing shadows against the grime-streaked walls. They had been moving for 10 minutes, descending through the station's skeletal structure away from the habitation deck. The sirens were a distant drone now, muffled by layers of bulkhead and insulation, but the panic they signified was still fresh in Jaden's throat. He stopped, gasping for breath, the dusty air burning his lungs. "Hold on," he wheezed, bracing a hand against the shaft wall. "Just stop for a second. You drag me into a vent, you crash my life, and I am still waiting for the part where this makes sense." Siratal paused and looked back over her shoulder. In the green glow of the emergency strip lighting running along the floor, her violet eyes seemed to cut right through him. She did not look winded. She did not even look afraid. She looked like a statue carved from tragedy and resolve. "We do not have time for history lessons." "Jaden," she said, her voice low and urgent. "Make time," Jaden shot back. "You said you are a princess. You said I am a target. I am a grease monkey on a rock floating in the ass end of the galaxy. Connect the dots because I am not seeing the picture." Siratal turned her body as much as the narrow space allowed. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and frustration. "I am Siratal of the Alari Dominion," she began, the words carrying the weight of a formal recitation. "My people once ruled 20 star systems in the core worlds. We were the architects of the nebula gates. We wove light into solid matter. We were gods in the eyes of lesser civilizations." Jaden wiped sweat from his brow. "I have heard the stories. The Dominion fell 50 years ago. Civil war. Everyone died. Not everyone," she corrected. "The royal house fell. My father, the emperor, was betrayed by his generals, a faction known as the Vrakir. They wanted the power of the throne core without the discipline of the bloodline. They slaughtered the court. They hunted us across the stars. I have been running since I was a child." She shifted, the golden armor scraping softly against the metal. "But the Vrakir have a problem. The throne core, the massive planetary computer that controls our entire defense grid and our energy reserves, is bio-locked. It responds only to the specific genetic resonance of the Alari royal family. With my father dead and my brothers executed, I am the only one left who can open it. Jaden stared at her. So that is why they want you. You are the key. I am one key, she said, but I am a rogue element. I will not open the core for them. I would sooner see the Empire turn to ash than let the Vrakir enslave the galaxy with our technology. Okay, Jaden said, processing the information. That explains you. It does not explain to me. I am human. My DNA is a mess of Earth evolution. I have nothing to do with your space empire. That is where you are wrong, Siratal said. She reached out, her gloved hand hovering near his chest. 3,000 years ago, at the height of our expansion, Ilari scientists foresaw a potential extinction event. They initiated the Continuance Project. They traveled to developing worlds, primitive worlds, and they injected synthetic genetic sequences into the populations, dormant codes, biological backups. Jaden felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. You tampered with us? He asked, his voice rising. We planted a seed, she said. A single dominant genetic marker that would mimic the royal bloodline's resonance. It was designed to remain recessive for thousands of generations, invisible, until random probability brought it to the surface. It is a failsafe. If the royal line is extinguished, the seed of continuance can interface with the throne core. She looked him dead in the eye. You are the seed, Jaden. The marker has activated you. You are the first in 3 millennia. Jaden sat back on his heels, his head spinning. The absurdity of it washed over him. He was a dishonorably discharged technician who spent his nights fixing hydration pumps and drinking synthetic whiskey. He was not a genetic failsafe for a dead alien monarchy. This is insane, he muttered. You are saying I am what? A spare key? A backup hard drive made of meat? Siratal flinched at the crudeness of his words, but she did not deny them. To the Vrakir. You are a resource, she said softly. If they capture you, they will force you to interface with the core. They will use your blood to unlock the fleets. And once the core is open... She hesitated, looking away. Once it is open, they will not just kill you, Jaden. They will realize that your genetic material is valuable. They will not let that code die with you, they will farm you. They will breed a new lineage of puppet kings from your cells to ensure they never lose access again. The silence in the ventilation shaft was heavy, suffocating. Jaden felt the bile rise in his throat. The image she painted was clinical, horrific, and terrified him more than the thought of a simple execution. It stripped him of his humanity, reducing him to livestock. Farm me, he repeated, the words tasting like ash. That is why I came, Siratal said, her voice fierce again. I tracked the signal of your activation weeks ago. I knew the Vrakir would hear it too. It was only a matter of time. I came to find you before they did. To kill me? Jaden asked, the old bitterness from his court-martial surfacing. To wipe the hard drive so the bad guys cannot use it. I thought about it, she admitted. It would have been the strategic choice, the safe choice. She leaned forward, her face inches from his. But then I saw you. I saw you living a life that was small and hard. Yet you lived it with a strange, stubborn honor. I watched you fix things that were not yours to fix. I saw you protect the weak. I decided that the universe had taken enough from both of us. I am not here to kill you, Jaden. I am here to stop the cycle. I will not let them use you. I will not let them rebuild their empire on the backs of slaves and forced bloodlines. Jaden looked at her. He wanted to trust her. He wanted to believe that the beautiful, terrifying alien in the vent was a hero, but his past was a landscape of betrayals. His commanding officer had told him the mission was righteous right before ordering him to bomb civilians. Trust was a luxury he could not afford. "You expect me to believe you are doing this out of the goodness of your heart?" he asked, his voice hard. "You are royalty. You people deal in assets and liabilities." "I am not my father," she hissed, her eyes flashing. "And right now, I am the only thing standing between you and a vivisection table." Before Jaden could respond, the entire station groaned. A massive, concussive impact rocked the structure, throwing them both against the metal walls of the shaft. The lights flickered and died, replaced instantly by the red pulse of emergency strobes. Mila's voice blared through Jaden's earpiece, but it was distorted, breaking up over static. "Hull breach. Sector 1, hostile boarding, heavily armed, override codes detected." Then, a new voice cut over the station's intercom system. It was a voice that sounded like grinding stones, deep, synthesized, and terrifyingly calm. "Residents of Trellix 7. This is Commander Vrax of the reclaimed Ilari fleet. We are not here for your ore. We are not here for your credits. We are here for the traitor daughter, Siratal, and the asset she protects. Surrender them, and you will survive. Harbor them, and we will vent this station into the void." Jaden stared at the speaker grill in the vent wall. The blood drained from his face. "They are here," Siratal whispered. She reached down and tapped a sequence on her wrist bracer. Her armor hummed, the golden light intensifying. "We have to move," she said. "The service tunnel to the lower hangars is 2 junctions ahead. If we can reach the mining skiffs, we have a chance." She started crawling again, faster this time. Jaden hesitated for a fraction of a second, listening to the distant boom of explosive charges blowing open airlocks. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that his life as a cynical, lonely mechanic was officially over. He scrambled after her. They burst out of the ventilation shaft into a sub-level maintenance corridor. It was a chaotic tangle of pipes and conduit, steam hissing from ruptured lines. The air smelled of burning plastic and ozone. Siratal was on her feet instantly, her liquid light blade snapping into existence with a hum that set Jaden's teeth on edge. She spun, checking the corners. "Clear," she signaled. "Which way to the skiffs?" Jaden pulled up his gauntlet display. It was glitching, but he found the schematic. "Down this hall, left at the junction, then down the cargo lift," he said. "But the lift requires a security clearance I do not have. I have a sword that cuts through durasteel." Siratal noted. "Security clearance is irrelevant." They ran. Jaden's heavy boots thundered on the deck, while Siratal moved like a phantom, her cloak billowing behind her. They reached the junction just as a squad of soldiers rounded the corner at the far end of the hall. These were not standard pirates. They wore sleek, dark armor that looked insectoid, with multifaceted helmets and heavy plasma rifles. Ilari loyalists. "Target acquired," one of the soldiers shouted. The voice was distorted, metallic. Siratal did not hesitate. She shoved Jaden behind a heavy support pillar just as the air filled with searing bolts of purple energy. The plasma scorched the metal plating, showering them with sparks. "Stay down," she commanded. She launched herself into the corridor. Jaden peeked around the pillar, watching in disbelief. She was a blur of motion. She deflected a plasma bolt with her blade, sending it careening into a steam pipe, creating a cloud of blinding vapor. She used the cover to close the distance. It was not a fight. It was a dismantling. Siratal moved with a brutal acrobatic grace. She slid under a rifle butt, slashed upward, and severed the weapon and the hands holding it. She spun, kicking a second soldier into the wall with enough force to dent the metal. Her blade was a ribbon of light, cutting through armor and flesh with terrifying ease. In 10 seconds, 4 soldiers were down. Jaden stared, his mouth slightly open. He had seen combat. He had seen special forces operate. This was different. This was warfare as an art form. She turned to him, breathless but unharmed. Her violet eyes were wild, dilated with adrenaline. "Move!" she yelled. "More will come!" They sprinted toward the cargo lift. Siratal slashed the control panel, hot-wiring the door with the tip of her energy blade. The doors sparked and groaned open. They threw themselves inside, and Jaden punched the button for the hangar deck. The lift descended with a lurch. Jaden leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. He looked at Syrah. She was wiping the blade on her cloak, though the energy weapon held no blood. "You are good at that," he said, stating the obvious. "I was trained by the Imperial Guard from the moment I could walk," she said grimly. "A princess must know how to rule, but an exile must know how to kill." The lift jarred to a halt. The doors opened onto the hangar deck. Chaos greeted them. The hangar was a massive cavern carved into the asteroid rock. Sirens wailed. Mining crews were running in panic. But blocking the path to the primary docking bays was a dropship, sleek, black, and menacing. More armored soldiers were pouring out of it. "We cannot get to the main shuttles," Jaden shouted over the noise. "They are cutting us off. The skiffs." Siratal pointed to the far side of the bay, where a row of battered single-pilot mining vessels hung suspended in magnetic clamps. "They are small, fast. They are flying coffins," Jaden argued, "and those things are meant for asteroid hopping, not deep space combat. Do you have a better idea?" She challenged me. A plasma bolt sizzled past Jaden's ear, singing his hair. He ducked. "Skiffs it is," he yelled. They broke cover, sprinting across the open hangar floor. The Loyalists spotted them immediately. Concentrated fire erupted from the dropship, tearing up the deck plating around their feet. Jaden slid behind a stack of cargo crates, dragging Syrah down with him. They were pinned. 50 yards of open ground separated them from the nearest skiff. "We are not going to make it," Jaden said, checking his gauntlet. "I can overload the crane overhead, drop the container on them, but I need 30 seconds to bypass the safety protocols." "Do it," Syrah said. "I will buy you time." She stood up. "What are you doing?" Jaden grabbed her arm. "They will cut you to pieces." Siratal looked down at him. The chaos of the battle seemed to fade for a second. Her expression softened, the fierce warrior mask slipping to reveal the lonely woman beneath. She grabbed the front of his jumpsuit and pulled him toward her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate, fierce, and tasted of ozone and fear. Her lips were warm, startlingly human against the cold backdrop of the dying station. Jaden froze for a heartbeat, then surged forward, kissing her back. It was an instinctive reaction, a collision of two people standing on the edge of oblivion. For a fleeting second, the noise of the plasma fire fell away, replaced by the electric shock of contact. She pulled back, her eyes searching for him. "If we die," she whispers fiercely, "knowing that I did not lie. I came for you." She pushed him back down behind the crate and vaulted over the top, screaming a war cry in a language Jaden did not understand. "Syrah!" he shouted, but she was already gone. She became the center of the firestorm. She moved in a whirlwind of light, deflecting bolts, drawing the attention of every soldier on the deck. She was not attacking. She was dancing with death, forcing them to look at her, to aim at her. Jaden's fingers flew across his gauntlet interface. His hands were shaking, but his mind was icy clear. Come on, he muttered. "Bypass, bypass." The crane overhead groaned. The magnetic locks on a 10-ton container of raw ore are disengaged. Drop! Jaden punched the command. The container plummeted. It smashed into the cluster of soldiers near the dropship with a deafening, metallic crunch. The deck shook violently. Dust and debris exploded outward, creating a massive screen of smoke. Now! Jaden screamed. Siratal emerged from the smoke, her armor scorched, her cloak torn but alive. She sprinted toward him. Together. They scrambled toward the nearest skiff, a rusted yellow bucket of bolts named the Mole. Jaden hit the release on the canopy. It popped open with a hiss. The cockpit was tiny, designed for one pilot. "Get in!" he yelled, shoving Sira into the seat. "There is no room," she protested. "It is a mining skiff, not a luxury cruiser. Squeeze!" She jammed herself into the pilot's chair. Jaden dove in on top of her, straddling her lap, his back pressed against the control console, his legs jammed into the footwells on either side of her. It was intimate, uncomfortable, and ridiculous. "Close it," he yelled. The canopy slammed down, sealing them in. The sound of the battle muffled instantly. Jaden twisted around, his chest pressed against hers. He could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. He reached over her shoulders to grab the flight controls. "Do not touch the red switch," he warned, flipping toggles rapidly. "That jettisons the fuel core. Just fly." "Jaden!" He punched the ignition. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The skiff shuddered violently. "Hold on," he gritted out. "This is going to be rough." He slammed the throttle forward. The Mole shot out of the magnetic clamps like a cork from a bottle. The sudden acceleration pinned them together. Jaden fought the stick. The skiff was sluggish, heavy with armor plating meant to deflect asteroids, not laser fire. They blasted out of the hangar bay, through the atmospheric force field, and into the cold vacuum of space. Behind them, Trellick 7 was burning. Fires vented from the hull, painting the dark void with streaks of orange. Warning, the skiff's computer drowned. Proximity alert. Hostile vessel detecting. The Loyalist dropship had launched. It was sleeker, faster, and heavily armed. Red targeting lasers swept over their canopy. "They are locking on," Sira shouted, looking at the sensor display over Jaden's shoulder. I know. Jaden pulled the skiff into a tight spiral. The G-forces crushed them. Sira groaned, her head falling back against the headrest. "Can you shoot back?" Jaden yelled. "This ship has mining lasers," Sira replied. "They are short range. I need you to get us close." "Close?" Jaden laughed hysterically. "You want me to fly a dump truck into a knife fight? Do it." Jaden clenched his jaw. He stopped running. He yanked the stick back, killing their forward momentum and flipping the skiff 180 degrees. They were now drifting backward, facing the pursuing dropship. The enemy pilot hesitated, not expecting the maneuver. "Now!" Jaden screamed. Sira reached around him, her arms brushing his neck, and punched the weapon's activation. She grabbed the secondary targeting stick mounted on the armrest. The mining lasers were continuous beams. Designed to melt rock, they were not pulses. Two thick green beams erupted from the skiff's nose. Sira did not aim for the hull. She aimed for the sensors. She swept the beams across the dropship's cockpit canopy. The high-intensity cutting lasers melted the sensor arrays and blinded the transparasteel viewport in seconds. The dropship veered wildly, its guidance systems fried. It tumbled past them, missing the Mole by mere meters. Jaden slammed the throttle forward again, spinning them back around and blasting toward the debris field of the nearby asteroid belt. "We are not out of this yet," he said, his voice tight. "That was the Scout. The main cruiser is still out there." Sira slumped slightly beneath him, the adrenaline crash hitting her. Her hands were still on the controls, resting under his. "Get us to the nebula edge," she said breathlessly. "The interference will mask our signature." Jaden adjusted the course. He looked down at her. Their faces were inches apart. The confined cockpit forced an intimacy that neither of them was ready for, yet neither pulled away. "You have a strange way of rescuing people, Princess," he murmured, his heart still racing. "And you have a strange way of flying, Technician," she countered, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. Jaden looked back at the stars. They were running. He was a fugitive, a genetic experiment, and the pilot of a stolen mining skiff. He looked at the woman beneath him, the alien who had upended his universe. He realized with a terrified certainty that he wasn't angry anymore. He was all in. "Hang on," he said softly. "We are going into the dark." The skiff streaked away from the burning station, disappearing into the shadow of the asteroid belt, leaving his old life behind in a trail of ion exhaust. The warning klaxon of the mining skiff was not a sound so much as a physical vibration that rattled the fillings in Jaden's teeth. The starboard thruster had taken a direct hit from the Loyalist pursuit craft just before they engaged the jump drive, and now, dropping out of hyperspace, the damage was catastrophic. The console was a Christmas tree of red warning lights, screaming about thermal runaway and stabilizer failure. "Hold on!" Jaden roared, fighting the yoke with both hands. The muscles in his forearms burned as the hydraulics whined in protest. Through the cracked transparasteel of the canopy, the planet below was a swirling marble of turquoise and violent green. It was a jungle moon, uncharted and wild, rushing up to meet them at terminal velocity. The atmosphere hit the hull like a hammer, turning the black of space into a screaming curtain of orange fire. "Stabilizers are gone!" Sierra shouted from the cramped space beside him. She was punching commands into the secondary interface, her fingers moving with a speed that blurred. "I am diverting power to the inertial dampeners." "Divert it to the prayers!" Jaden yelled back. "We are coming in too hot." The skiff bucked like a wounded animal. The heat shield began to flake away, glowing embers streaming past the cockpit. Below them, the endless carpet of alien jungle grew rapidly, transforming from a green smear into distinct, towering trees. "Aim for the river," Sierra commanded, pointing to a ribbon of silver winding through the density. "I am aiming for not dying." Jaden gritted out. He slammed the retro thrusters. The ship groaned, the metal shrieking as the deceleration force slammed them into their seats. It was not enough. They clipped the top of a massive ironwood tree. The impact spun the skiff violently. The world became a kaleidoscope of green leaves, shattering glass and tearing metal. Branches whipped against the hull with the sound of gunshot blasts. They crashed through the canopy, snapping trunks as thick as refinery pipes before slamming into the soft, marshy earth. The skiff slid, carving a deep trench through the mud and undergrowth, tearing off the port wing and crushing the nose cone. Then, silence. It was a heavy, ringing silence, broken only by the hiss of cooling metal and the dripping of rain on the hull. Jaden coughed, waving away the acrid smoke that filled the cockpit. He tasted copper, blood from a split lip. He looked to his side. Sierra was slumped against the restraint harness, her silver hair curtaining her face. "Sierra." He unbuckled his harness with trembling fingers and reached for her. She groaned, shifting slightly. Her head snapped up, eyes wide and violet, pupils dilated. She grabbed his wrist, her grip bruising. "Are they here?" she whispered, her voice fierce despite the daze. "We are down," Jaden said, checking her for injuries. "We crashed. Are you hurt?" She took a deep breath, the golden armor on her chest rising and falling. "I am intact," You? I will live. But the mole is dead. Jaden kicked the release for the canopy. The explosive bolts fired, but the frame was warped. He had to shove the heavy transparent steel slab up with his shoulder until it fell away into the mud with a wet thud. The humidity hit them instantly. It was a thick, suffocating blanket of heat and moisture, smelling of rotting vegetation and sweet, cloying pollen. The sounds of the jungle rushed in, clicks, chirps, and a low, throbbing hum that seemed to vibrate from the ground itself. "We need to move," Sira said, climbing out of the wreckage. Her movements were stiff, favoring her left side. "If the Loyalists tracked our trajectory, probes will be entering the atmosphere within the hour." Jaden grabbed the survival kit and his laser torch from the storage locker. He looked at the smoking ruin of the ship that had been his only ticket off Trellick 7. "Great," he muttered. "Stranded on a swamp moon with an alien princess and a bounty on my head. Just another Tuesday." They moved away from the crash site, pushing through ferns the size of shuttle wings. The vegetation here was aggressive. Vines seemed to recoil when touched, and the moss on the trees pulsed with a faint, rhythmic bioluminescence. The light was fading fast. The planet's rotation was rapid, or perhaps they had just landed at dusk. They walked for 2 hours, putting distance between themselves and the smoke plume of the skiff. Sira led the way, her liquid light blade deactivated but held ready in her hand. She moved with an inherent grace that the jungle could not impede, stepping over roots and sliding through gaps in the foliage while Jaden hacked and stumbled behind her. "Freeze," Sira whispered, dropping into a crouch. Jaden dove into the mud beside her. Above the canopy, a low whine cut through the ambient noise of the jungle. Through a gap in the leaves, Jaden saw a dark-shaped silhouette against the twilight sky. It was a seeker drone, a black sphere studded with sensor arrays. Scanning the forest floor with beams of red light, it hovered, the whine rising in pitch, then moved on, sweeping west toward the crash site. "They found us," Jaden whispered, wiping mud from his eyes. "They found the ship," Sira corrected. "The dense magnesium content of this soil is scattering the sensor readings. They cannot lock onto our biosigns unless they are directly on top of us." She looked at him, and for the first time since the station, he saw the exhaustion etched into her features. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the raw reality of their situation. "We need shelter," she said. "Night on these moons brings predators worse than drones." They found a hollow beneath the roots of a gargantuan tree that grew out of the side of a rocky hill. The roots formed a natural cage, creating a dry, cavernous space hidden from the sky. Jaden cleared out the debris while Sira set up a perimeter with small proximity sensors she pulled from her belt. Night fell with the suddenness of a switch being thrown. The jungle did not go dark. It woke up. The bioluminescence intensified, turning the forest into a dreamscape of neon blues, purples, and greens. Glowing insects floated through the air like wandering stars. Jaden sat with his back against the rough bark of the root wall, eating a nutrient bar that tasted like chalk and regret. Sira sat opposite him, cleaning the mud from her armor. The silence between them was thick, weighted with the unspoken. Jaden watched her. In the dim light of the glowing moss, she looked less like a warrior and more like a painting that had been left out in the rain. Beautiful, but weathering at the edges. "Why me?" he asked suddenly. Sira looked up, her hands pausing. "We have discussed this. Jaden, the genetic marker—" "No," Jaden interrupted. "Not the DNA. I get the science. I am a battery for your throne. I get that. I am asking why you chose to save me. You could have grabbed me, stunned me, and thrown me on a ship. You could have told me nothing. You could have let the loyalists take me and then stolen me back. He leaned forward. But you followed me. You fixed my repairs. You left me food. You watched me for weeks. That is not tactical. Sira, that is personal. Why? Sira looked away, staring out into the glowing darkness of the jungle. She sheathed her blade, the click loud in the small space. I have spent my entire life as a symbol, she said softly. Even before the fall, I was the third daughter. I was a piece of the succession puzzle, a diplomatically valuable asset. Then, after the coup, I was the traitor daughter, the last hope, the exile. She turned her gaze back to him. I was never just Sira. I was always a function of the Empire. When I found your signal, I intended to be efficient. I intended to assess you as a resource. And I watched you. She said, I watched you live a life that was entirely your own. You were lonely, yes. You were bitter. But you were free in a way I have never been. You made choices based on what you felt was right, not what was dictated by protocol or survival. She shifted, crawling across the small space until she was sitting just a few feet from him. Her eyes were shimmering, reflecting the ambient light. There was a night, 2 weeks ago, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. You were on the observation deck. You were listening to music, old earth jazz, I think. You were conducting an invisible orchestra, eyes closed, smiling. You looked so complete in that moment, watching you. I remembered what it felt like to just be. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of the dirt floor between them. I watched you for weeks, Jaden. Not because I needed to verify the code. I watched you because you made me feel alive again. For the first time in 50 years, I was not a weapon or a refugee. I was just a woman watching a man. Jaden felt his breath catch in his throat. The confession hung in the air, fragile and devastating. He had spent his life feeling invisible, discarded by the military, ignored by the universe. To hear that he had been the anchor for this celestial creature was overwhelming. He reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cool, but her palm was rough, calloused from the sword hilt. You are not a weapon, he said, his voice rough, and you are not a resource either. Sira looked down at their joined hands. She trembled, a fine vibration that traveled from her skin to his. I do not know how to be anything else, she admitted. I can show you, Jaden said. The tension that had been building since the station, the adrenaline of the escape, the proximity in the skiff, it all coalesced into a sudden, undeniable gravity. Sira looked up, her gaze searching his face. She moved closer, until her knees brushed him. Jaden, she whispered, her breath hitching. I have never been with anyone who did not look at me and see a title. When you look at me, what do you see? Jaden brought his other hand up to cup her cheek. Her skin was impossibly soft against his rough, grease-stained thumb. I see trouble, he said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. I see the woman who crashed my ship. I see Sira. She let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and closed the distance. When she kissed him, it was not like the desperate, chaotic kiss on the hangar deck. This was slow, deliberate, and terrifyingly open. Her lips were soft, tasting of the sweet rain. Jaden wrapped his arms around her, pulling her against him, burying his hands in the liquid silver of her hair. The armor she wore was hard and cold, a barrier between them. Sira pulled back, breathless, her eyes dark with a sudden fierce need. She reached for the clasps at her shoulders. Help me, she commanded softly. They stripped away the layers of the Alari warplate, the pauldrons, the breastplate, the heavy gauntlets, until they were piled in the corner like discarded husks. Underneath, she wore a simple body glove of woven silk. She peeled it away, revealing skin that glowed with a faint pearlescent luminescence in the dark. She was stunning, a creature of light and muscle, marked by faint scars of battle that only made her more real. But it was the look in her eyes that undid him, a raw, naked hunger that mirrored his own. They moved out from the root hollow, drawn by an unspoken agreement to the soft, mossy rise of the hill just outside, beneath the canopy of the glowing trees. The air was warm and thick. They came together on the carpet of bioluminescent moss. It was a collision of two worlds. Jaden was solid, warm, and human. Sierra was fluid, cool, and electric. When he touched her skin, the light within her seemed to pulse in time with her heartbeat. It was not graceful. It was frantic, a release of weeks of fear and years of loneliness. It was the desperate affirmation that they were still alive, that they were not just pawns in a galactic game. Sierra pressed him down into the moss, her strength surprising him, her hands exploring him with a wonder that bordered on reverence. "You are so warm," she whispered against his neck, her body trembling against his. She made him feel things he had thought burned out of him years ago. Not just desire, but a profound aching connection. As they moved together, the jungle seemed to react to them. The alien trees above them pulsed brighter with every breath they took, the leaves shimmering in waves of violet and blue, syncing with the rhythm of their bodies. The insects swirled around them in a vortex of light. It was a fever dream. It was the end of the world and the beginning of a new one. When the peak came, it tore a cry from Sierra's throat that harmonized with the strange song of the planet, a sound of pure, unadulterated freedom. Later, the jungle quieted. Jaden lay on his back, staring up through a break in the canopy at the unfamiliar stars. Sierra lay with her head on his chest, her arm thrown across him, her breathing slow and deep. The glow of her skin had dimmed to a soft, contented hum. Jaden ran his hand down the curve of her spine. His mind was racing, trying to catch up with his heart. This was a mistake, tactical, logical. It was a disaster. He was falling for the target. He was falling for a woman who carried a war in her wake. He should pull away. He should put his walls back up. It would hurt less when this inevitably ended in fire and blood. But then Sierra shifted, pressing a kiss to the skin over his heart, and he knew he was already lost. There was no talking himself out of this. He tightened his arm around her. "Sierra," he said, his voice rumbling in his chest. She lifted her head, her hair spilling over him like a waterfall of mercury. "Yes? We cannot stay here. The drones will switch to thermal imaging once the sun comes up. They will find the heat signature of the wreck, and then they will find us." "I know," she said, the reality of their situation seeping back into her eyes. "We need a ship," Jaden said, "a real one, not a mining bucket." Sierra sat up, gathering her discarded body glove. She looked down at him, and a spark of her old determination returned. "There is a way," she said, "but it is dangerous. I think we passed dangerously about 3 star systems ago," Jaden replied, sitting up and brushing the moss from his shoulders. "This moon," Sierra said, pulling the silk over her skin. "It is not just an uncharted jungle. It was once a staging ground for the Alari expansion fleet, centuries ago. There are listening posts buried here, old tech, forgotten. And you think one still works? Ilari technology does not break." "Jaden," she said with a touch of pride, "it sleeps. If we can find a subspace beacon, I can boost the signal. I can send a coded message on a frequency the loyalists do not monitor." "To whom?" "To an old friend," she said, though her expression was complicated. Nesk Tal. He is a smuggler, a privateer. He operates in this sector. A smuggler, Jaden repeated. Great. I love smugglers. They are always so reliable and never sell you out for a handful of credits. Nesk owes me, Sira said grimly. He will come, but we have to find the beacon first. They spent the next hour searching. Sira attuned the sensors in her armor to the specific resonance of decaying Alari power cells. They moved through the jungle, the intimate silence of the night replaced by a tense, purposeful focus. They found it half buried in the side of a ravine, an obsidian obelisk jutting out of the mud, covered in vines and alien fungus. It looked like a tombstone. Jaden knelt beside it, scraping away the muck. The surface was smooth, cold to the touch. It is dormant, he said. Dead. Stand back, Sira ordered. She placed her hand on the center of the obelisk. She closed her eyes. The golden patterns on her armor flared. Jaden watched as she interfaced with the machine, not through wires or keyboards, but through bioelectric induction. The obelisk hummed. A deep, subsonic vibration shook the mud from its surface. Runes began to glow in a sharp, piercing white light along its edges. I am in, Sira said, her voice strained with effort. The power coupling is degraded. I have to route the signal through my suit's reserves. She gritted her teeth, the light from the obelisk reflecting harshly on her face. Nesk Tal. This is Sira Tal, requesting immediate extraction at coordinates. A high-pitched screech erupted from the obelisk, followed by a blast of static. Sira cried out and was thrown backward, landing hard in the mud. The obelisk went dark. Sira! Jaden scrambled to her, helping her up. What happened? She was shaking, clutching her arm. The suit's power levels were critical. I sent the burst. She gasped, but the dampeners on the beacon failed. The signal was not shielded. Jaden looked at the dark monolith. What does that mean? It means I contacted Nesk, she said, looking at him with wide, fearful eyes. But I also just screamed our location to everyone in the system. The loyalists, the bounty hunters, everyone. As if in answer, the sky above them lit up. 3 distinct streaks of fire cut through the atmosphere, descending rapidly toward their position. They are coming, Jaden said, pulling her to her feet. We have to move, Sira said. We have to get to the extraction point before they cut us off. Jaden looked at the descending ships, then at the woman who had just risked everything for a chance to save them. He grabbed her hand, interlacing their fingers. Then let's run, he said. They plunged back into the jungle, the darkness around them now broken by the terrifying light of the hunting parties closing in. Time had run out. The jungle canopy erupted in a violent storm of shredded leaves and snapping branches as a massive shape descended from the night sky. It was not the sleek, predatory silhouette of a loyalist interceptor, but a bulky, asymmetrical freighter that looked like it had been welded together from the scrap of 3 different graveyards. The engines screamed with the sound of a dying turbine, scorching the earth black as the ship crushed a grove of ironwood trees and slammed onto the mud with a bone-shaking thud. The loading ramp hissed open, venting steam into the humid air. Jaden Rourke shielded his eyes from the blinding floodlights. Beside him, Sira Tal stood tense, her hand hovering near the hilt of her deactivated light blade. A figure sauntered down the ramp. He was tall, reptilian, and dressed in a long coat made of iridescent synth leather that cost more than Jaden's entire lifetime of earnings. His scales were a dull emerald green, and his eyes were vertical slits of amusement. He held a heavy blaster pistol loosely in one hand, spinning it by the trigger guard. You look terrible, princess, the reptile drawled. His voice was a gravelly hiss, full of mocking affection. And you smell like a swamp. Is this the latest fashion in the core worlds? Nesk, Sira said, her voice tight. You are late. Nesk Tal grinned, revealing rows of serrated teeth. I am fashionable on time. The loyalist fleet is breathing down my neck. My scanners are lit up like a festival, and I am parking in a mud puddle. You are welcome. He turned his gaze to Jaden. The reptilian eyes narrowed, scanning him from boots to hairline. So, this is the prize, Nesk said. The little human mechanic who has the whole galaxy in a panic. He does not look like much. A bit scrawny. Does he even know how to hold a weapon? Jaden stepped forward, bristling. I know how to fix the stabilizer you blew out on landing. Your port thruster is misaligned. Nesk laughed, a dry, hacking sound. Feisty. I like him. But let us talk business. The smuggler holstered his weapon and crossed his arms. I am risking my ship, my crew, and my very expensive reputation to haul you out of this mess. Sira, the Dominion is dead, which means your credit accounts are frozen. I do not run a charity. I told you I would pay you in raw data from the Imperial caches. Sira said, codes, locations of weapon depots. Nesk waved a clawed hand dismissively. Boring. I want something more tangible. I want a sample. He pointed a claw at Jaden. I want a vial of his blood, just one. The black market value for the genetic sequence of a living seed is astronomical. I could buy a moon with that. Jaden felt a cold spike of adrenaline. He looked at Sira, waiting for the negotiation. Before Jaden could blink, Sira moved. It was a blur of motion, faster than the eye could track. 1 second she was standing beside Jaden. The next, she was pressed against Nesk. Her forearm slammed against his throat, pinning him to the hydraulic strut of the landing ramp. Her other hand held her unlit hilt directly under his chin. If you touch him, Sira whispered, her voice vibrating with a lethal calm. I will not just kill you. Nesk. I will carve the scales from your body one by one and feed them to the engines while you watch. Nesk gagged, his eyes widening. He clawed at her arm, but she was immovable, an anchor of golden armor and fury. Sira! Jaden shouted, stepping forward. He had seen her fight, but this was different. This was personal. This was ferocious. Do not test me. Nesk, she hissed. He is not a commodity. He is under my protection. If you want to leave this moon alive, you will take us aboard, and you will forget you ever saw a drop of his blood. Do we have an accord? Nesk tapped the ramp 3 times in surrender. Sira released him, shoving him back. He stumbled, rubbing his throat, coughing. By the void. Sira, Nesk wheezed, looking at her with a mix of fear and grudging respect. You used to be fun. Fine. No blood. Just the weapon codes. Get on board before I change my mind or the loyalists turn us into slag. The interior of the Copperhead was a maze of exposed conduit, flickering lights, and cargo crates strapped down with magnetic netting. It smelled of stale air, ozone, and alien spices. Nesk shoved them into a hidden smuggling compartment beneath the main deck plates, a cramped space usually reserved for illegal narcotics or stolen tech. Stay here until we clear the system, Nesk ordered, tossing them a bag of rations and try not to touch anything. This ship holds together on willpower and duct tape. The deck vibrated as the engines roared to life. The sensation of liftoff was heavy and jarring, pressing Jaden back against the cold metal wall. He watched Sira. She sat opposite him, her knees drawn up, her eyes closed. She looked exhausted, the adrenaline crash leaving her pale. You were going to kill him, Jaden said quietly. Sira opened her eyes. Violet met Brown. Yes. He was your fiancé? A political arrangement, she said, her voice flat. Before the fall. Our families wanted to merge our trade routes. Nesk was a prince then, before he decided piracy was more profitable than politics. We never liked each other much, but we understood each other. She looked down at her hands. He sees you as a payday. Jaden, everyone does. I had to make sure he understood the cost of that ambition. Jaden shifted in the cramped space. The reality of what she had done, what she was doing, settled on him. She was burning bridges, threatening old allies, and putting herself in the crosshairs of an entire fleet, all for him. Tell me the truth, Jaden said. The real truth. You said you do not want the Empire to return. You said you want to break the cycle. Why? Sierra leaned her head back against the bulkhead. The ship shuddered as it punched through the atmosphere and engaged the warp drive. The sudden shift to the smooth hum of hyperspace made the silence in the hold louder. The Alari Dominion was beautiful, and Sierra began softly. We built cities of glass that floated in the clouds. We cured diseases, we created art that could make you weep. But it was all built on a lie. She looked at Jaden, her expression hardening. We did not just conquer worlds. Jaden, we shackled them. The Continuance Project, the genetic coding that is inside you, was not just a backup for the throne. It was the blueprint for our control. We planted limiters in the species we subjugated, genetic leashes. We could turn off a planet's fertility with a signal. We could induce plagues to quell rebellions. We called it order. It was slavery on a molecular level. Jaden felt a knot form in his stomach. The beautiful, shimmering figure who had saved his life was the heir to a legacy of cosmic horror. My father believed it was necessary, Sierra continued. He believed that chaos was the enemy of existence. He taught me that the rule required a heavy hand, but I saw the suffering. I saw the silence of worlds that were too afraid to speak. When the Vrakir rebelled, they did not do it to free the galaxy. They did it because they wanted to hold the leash. She reached out, her fingers brushing the fabric of his jumpsuit. If they catch you, Jaden, they will not just open the vault, they will reactivate the inhibition protocols. They will enslave 100 worlds again. That is why I defend you, not because of who you are, but because of what you represent. You are the key to the cage. I want to break the key. Jaden looked at her, seeing the immense crushing weight she carried. She was a traitor to her people to save everyone else. And if we break the key, Jaden asked, what happens to the Alari? To you? Then we faded, she whispered. We become history, and I become the last of a dead line. Jaden reached out and took her hand. It was trembling. You are not just a line of code, Sierra, he said firmly. You are the woman who likes earth jazz. You are the one who saved me from a melting refinery. To hell with the Empire. I am fighting for you. Hours later, the ship dropped out of warp in a remote sector of the outer rim. Nesk announced over the comms that they had to kill the main gravity generator to perform a silent running sequence through a sensor net. The gravity in the hold vanished slowly. Jaden felt his stomach lurch as he floated upward, untethered. The crate he had been sitting on drifted away. Sierra pushed off the wall, floating toward him with the grace of someone who had spent half her life in 0G. Her silver hair fanned out around her head like a halo, shimmering in the dim emergency lighting. They drifted together in the center of the small room. Without gravity, the physical distance between them seemed to vanish. There was no up or down, only each other. Jaden reached out, grabbing the strap of her armor to steady himself. They rotated slowly in the air, face to face. The intensity of the jungle moon had not faded, it had only sharpened. The threat of death was a constant hum in the background, making every second feel finite and precious. Jaden, Sierra breathed, her hand coming up to rest on his chest, keeping them anchored. He looked at her, floating here, stripped of the weight of gravity. She looked almost ethereal, but her eyes were human, filled with fear and longing. "You are staring again," she murmured. "I am memorizing," he said. He pulled her closer, her legs wrapped naturally around his waist, instinct taking over in the weightless environment. The contact was electric. He could feel the warmth of her through the thin fabric of his flight suit. "We are going to a place that might kill us both," Jaden said, his voice rough. "I know," she replied. "I need you to know something," he said. "Before we get there. Before everything goes to hell." She waited, her hands moving to the back of his neck, her fingers tangling in his hair. "Back at the station," Jaden said. "I thought I was losing my mind. I saw shadows. I felt a presence. It terrified me. But now," he leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "Now, the thought of not feeling you there is what scares me. You haunt me, Sierra, and I don't want you to stop." Sierra let out a soft, broken sound and kissed him. In zero gravity. The kiss was an anchor. It was deep and consuming. They floated in the dark, spinning slowly, wrapped in each other. It was a moment of absolute peace in the center of a war. For a few minutes, there were no empires, no genetic codes, no bounty hunters. Just the warmth of skin and the beat of two hearts sinking in the silence of the void. The copperhead docked with a metallic groan. "We are here," Nesk's voice crackled over the intercom. "The Viridian asteroid field. And let me tell you, this place gives me the creeps. You have 1 hour. Sierra. If you are not back, I am leaving. I do not care how scary you are." Jaden and Sierra geared up. Sierra donned her full armor again, the golden plates locking into place with magnetic clicks. She handed Jaden a heavy plasma pistol she had taken from the ship's armory. "Do you know how to use this?" she asked. "Point and pull." "Right?" Jaden asked, checking the charge. "Try not to shoot your own foot," she advised, though her smile was tight. They cycled the airlock and stepped out into the vacuum, magnetic boots clamping onto the hull of the derelict station. The Alari Archive was not a building. It was a hollowed-out asteroid, its surface bristling with ancient, dormant antenna arrays. It floated in the silence of the field, a tomb of information. They navigated the exterior walkway and found the manual override for the airlock. Sierra placed her hand on the panel. The DNA interface recognized her instantly. The heavy blast doors ground open, shaking centuries of dust into the vacuum. Inside, the air was stale and freezing. The emergency lights flickered to life as they walked, illuminating long hallways lined with crystalline data stacks. It was a library of the dead. "This way," Sierra whispered. "The master control for the bloodline registry is in the central core." They moved deeper. The silence was oppressive. Jaden kept his weapon raised, sweeping the corners. He felt like an intruder in a mausoleum. They reached a massive circular chamber. In the center stood a pedestal made of obsidian, surrounded by a ring of floating data crystals. "This is it," Sierra said, approaching the pedestal. "If I can access the root command, I can delete the continuance protocols. I can wipe your genetic marker from the system's recognition database. You will just be Jaden again." She began to type on the holographic interface. Runes flashed in the air, red, then amber. Suddenly, the lights in the chamber shifted from white to a menacing crimson. A low hum vibrated through the floor, rising in pitch until it was a deafening whine. "Unauthorized access detected." A voice boomed. It was not mechanical. It was a recorded voice, rich, commanding, and terrifyingly familiar to Sierra. Father, she whispered, freezing. A hologram materialized above the pedestal. It was a towering projection of an Ilari male in ceremonial robes, his face stern and regal. But his eyes were dead, replaced by streaming code. It was an AI echo, a cognitive imprint of the last emperor. Sira Tal, the AI said, "My daughter, you return to the halls of your ancestors. Have you brought the key?" Sira stepped back, shielding Jaden. "I have brought the end of your madness. Father, unlock the protocols. The Empire must endure." The AI intoned, "The chaos of the galaxy must be ordered." The holographic gaze shifted, locking onto Jaden. The sensors scanned him in a heartbeat. Genetic signature confirmed. Seed of continuance identified. Designation, Prime. The AI's face twisted, the fatherly mask dissolving into a cold mask of algorithmic rage. "Why does the key align with the traitor? You have brought him here to destroy us. I brought him here to free us," Sira shouted. "Freedom is chaos." The AI roared. "The bloodline must be preserved. The vessel must be secured. The traitor must be purged." Mechanical shrieks erupted from the walls. Hatches slammed open, and security drones, ancient spider-like machines with rusted chassis and glowing red eyes, poured into the chamber. "Run!" Sira screamed. She drew her light blade, slashing the first drone in half as it leaped at her. Jaden raised the plasma pistol and fired. The bolt took a drone in the leg, blowing it apart. But 3 more scuttled over the wreckage. They backed toward the door. The room was swarming. The AI Emperor watched impassively from above. "Secure the key," the AI commanded. "Terminate the obstacle." A heavy combat drone dropped from the ceiling directly behind Jaden. It raised a razor-sharp limb, targeting his spine. "Jaden!" Sira yelled. She threw herself across the gap between them. She did not have time to strike. She used her body as a shield. The drone's limb struck. It punched through the gap in her armor, between the pauldron and the breastplate. Sira gasped, a sound of shock and pain that cut through the noise of the battle. She collapsed, dragging the drone down with her. With a roar of effort, she drove her light blade up into the machine's central processor. It sparked and died, collapsing on top of her. "Sira!" Jaden screamed. He fired wildly, clearing the path. He grabbed the heavy drone and heaved it off her. Sira was clutching her shoulder. Blood, bright and silver blue, seeped through her fingers. "Can you move?" Jaden demanded, hauling her up. "Go!" she gritted out, her face gray. "Leave me! They want you! Not happening!" Jaden shouted. He threw her uninjured arm over his shoulder, wrapping his arm around her waist. He fired the pistol with his free hand, blasting a drone that blocked the exit. He dragged her into the hallway. The door began to seal. Jaden fired at the control panel, fusing the circuitry. The door jammed half open. He squeezed them through, the metal scraping against his back. They stumbled down the corridor. Sira was dead weight now, her legs failing. "Jaden," she whispered, her voice slurring. "You have to go. The logic is sound. If I die, you can still hide." "Shut up," Jaden snapped, panic rising in his chest. "I am not interested in logic." They reached the airlock. Jaden slammed the override. The outer door cycled. He could see the copperhead attached to the hull, the docking tube vibrating. "Nesk, open up! We are coming in hot!" Jaden yelled into his comms. The airlock hissed open. Jaden practically threw Sira into the transition tube. He scrambled in after her, hitting the release to detach just as the station's security lasers began to slice through the outer hull. Nesk detached the ship with a violent lurch. They drifted away, the Archive's automated turrets firing blindly into the asteroid field. In the medical bay of the Copperhead, the lighting was harsh and white. Sira lay on the biobed, her armor stripped away. The wound in her shoulder was deep, ugly, and cauterized around the edges. Nesk was piloting, putting as much distance between them and the AI as possible. Jaden was alone with her. He worked with trembling hands, applying the med gel Nesk had provided. He was a mechanic, not a doctor, but he knew how to patch leaks. He treated her body like the most precious, fragile system he had ever worked on. Sierra hissed as the gel knit the tissue together. Her eyes fluttered open. They were hazy, the violet light dim. "You are an idiot," she whispered weakly. "You should have left me." Jaden finished the bandage. He wiped the silver blood from his hands and looked at her. His face was pale, his jaw set in a hard line. "You followed me for weeks." "Sierra," he said, his voice shaking with the aftermath of the terror. "You crossed the galaxy. You fought a war for me." He leaned down, brushing the hair from her sweaty forehead. "I am not leaving you behind. Not now. Not ever." Sierra looked at him, and a single tear, silver and heavy, rolled down her cheek. She reached up, her hand weak, and gripped his fingers. "Then we are in this till the end?" she asked. Jaden kissed her hand, holding it against his cheek. "Till the end. Princess. Even if it kills us." The ship jumped to hyperspace, the stars stretching into lines of infinite light, carrying them away from the ghosts of the past and toward a future that was becoming more dangerous by the second. The silence of hyperspace was usually comforting to Jaden Rourke. A void where no alarms rang and no machinery demanded repair. But aboard the Copperhead, the silence was heavy with the scent of burnt circuitry and dried blood. Jaden sat in the pilot's seat, his hands gripping the yoke with a force that whitened his knuckles. He was not steering. The nav computer was locked onto a coordinate deep in the unmapped Veil Nebula. But he refused to let go. For the first time in his life, he was not just fixing a broken system, he was driving the machine. Nesk Tal was asleep in the co-pilot's chair, his reptilian snoring a rhythmic rattle that filled the cockpit. Sierra was in the med bay. She had been there for 12 hours, submerged in a healing trance that Nesk promised would knit her torn flesh faster than any human medicine. Jaden checked the monitors. They were 3 hours out from the rendezvous point. The Sanctuary. It was a hidden station in a neutral system, governed by the exiles, Ilari who had rejected the Vrakir coup but refused to bow to the old imperial ways. Sierra believed they would help. Sierra believed they would see Jaden as a person, not a key. Jaden was less optimistic. He stood up, his legs stiff, and walked to the rear of the cockpit. He needed to check on her. He told himself it was to monitor her vitals, but the truth was simpler. He needed to see that she was still breathing. He entered the medbay quietly. The lights were dimmed to a soft amber. Sierra lay on the bio-bed, her silver hair spread like a halo around her head. The heavy bandage on her shoulder was stark white against her luminous skin. She looked peaceful, a sharp contrast to the warrior who had dismantled a combat drone with a sword made of light. On the small table beside the bed lay her gauntlets and the data core from her armor. The core was blinking with a low battery warning. Jaden frowned. If the core died, the navigation log she had saved from the archive raid might be corrupted. He picked it up, intending to plug it into the ship's recharge port. As he touched the interface, the holographic emitter flickered to life, projecting a menu in the air. He did not mean to snoop. He was looking for the power settings, but his finger brushed a file labeled Observation Log. Sol 3 subject. The date stamp was from 3 weeks ago. Before they met, before the refinery fire, curiosity, cold and sharp, pierced him. He tapped the file. Sierra's voice filled the small room. It was not the commanding voice of the princess or the fierce cry of the warrior. It was a whisper, intimate and weary. Day 14, the recording said, The subject, Jaden Rourke, is eating alone again. He sits on the gantry overlooking the fuel silos. He has a nutrient pack, but he does not eat it. He is watching the transport ships leave. There is such a profound stillness in him. It is not peace. It is resignation. He looks at the stars as if they owe him an apology. Jaden froze. He remembered that night. He had been thinking about his court-martial, wondering if he should just jump into the silo and be done with it. The recording shifted. Day 20. Sierra's voice continued, softer now. He fixed the heating unit in the lower habitation deck today. It was not on his work order. He had to steal parts from the officers' mess to do it. He risked punishment to keep strangers warm. Why does he do that? He pretends to care for nothing, yet he bleeds for everyone. He is a contradiction, a beautiful, broken contradiction. Jaden gripped the edge of the table. His heart hammered against his ribs. Day 25, the voice whispered. I should make contact. The Verkeer scans are getting closer, but I find myself hesitating. I am afraid, not of the enemy, but of breaking his solitude. He is so complete in his sadness. If I step into his light, I will destroy him. I will bring my war to his doorstep. There was a long pause in the recording, filled only by the sound of her breathing. I think I love him, she whispered, though I do not know if I should. I do not know if a creature like me is allowed to love a man like him. But watching him makes me want to be more than a princess. It makes me want to be real. The file ended. Jaden stood in the dim light, the silence rushing back in. He felt as though the floor plates had dropped away beneath him. She had seen him. Not just the genetic code, not just the mechanic, but the man beneath the grease and the sarcasm. She had loved him from the shadows before he even knew her name. He looked at her sleeping form. A surge of fierce protectiveness rose in his chest, hot and overwhelming. He was done running. He was done being the victim. If she wanted to be real, he would make sure she survived long enough to try. He leaned down and kissed her forehead. Sleep. Princess, he whispered. I have got the wheel. Sierra woke an hour before they docked. She found Jaden in the galley, cleaning the plasma pistol with a focus that bordered on obsession. She moved stiffly, her arm in a sling, but her eyes were clear. You heard it, she said. Jaden did not look up. He did not ask what she meant. He knew she would have checked the access logs. I heard it, he said. And? He set the pistol down and looked at her. His gaze was steady, stripped of the defensive humor he usually wore like armor. And I think you are a terrible spy, he said softly. You fell in love with the mark. That is rule number 1 in the handbook, is it not? Never fall for the asset. Sierra offered a tired, wan smile. I was never very good at following rules. That is why I am in exile. Jaden stood and walked over to her. He was careful not to touch her injured shoulder. He rested his hands on her waist, pulling her gently toward him. You saw me. Sierra. When I was invisible to everyone else. You saw me. He leaned his forehead against hers. We are going to finish this. We are going to go to this sanctuary. We are going to get the support we need. And then we are going to the core. I am not doing it because of the prophecy. I am doing it because you love me. And I will be damned if I let you die for it. Sierra closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. For a moment, the weight of the Empire fell away. The comms unit buzzed. Nesk's voice was sharp. Strap in, lovebirds. We are approaching the perimeter, and try to look royal. These exiles are a pretentious bunch. The sanctuary was not a station in the traditional sense. It was a cluster of hollowed-out asteroids connected by crystalline tubes. orbiting a brown dwarf star that barely gave off enough light to see. It was a place of shadows and secrets, hidden deep within the interference of the nebula. The Copperhead was guided into a docking bay by tractor beams. As the ramp lowered, Jaden saw the reception committee. They were Ilari, tall and shimmering, dressed in robes of deep indigo and silver. They did not look like refugees. They looked like a government in waiting. They stood in precise rows, their faces impassive masks of porcelain beauty. Sira straightened her spine. She wore her damaged armor, the scorch marks and the hole in the pauldron visible badges of her struggle. She refused to hide them. "Stay close to me," she murmured to Jaden. "Do not speak unless spoken to." They value protocol above oxygen. They walked down the ramp. Nesk stayed by the ship, his hand resting on his blaster, watching the perimeter with paranoid eyes. A tall Ilari woman with eyes like polished obsidian stepped forward. She carried a staff topped with a glowing blue crystal. This was Counselor Valis, the leader of the exiles. "Sira Tal," Valis said. Her voice was cool, echoing in the cavernous bay. "You return to us broken and hunted. I return alive." "Valis," Sira replied, her head high, "and I brought the seed." A murmur rippled through the gathered Ilari. All eyes shifted to Jaden. He felt like a specimen under a microscope. He resisted the urge to check his fly or wipe his hands on his pants. He stood his ground, meeting their gazes with a glare he had perfected during his court-martial. "He is human," Valis said, the word tasting of distaste. "A primitive vessel." "He is the key," Sira said sharply. "And he is under my protection. We require sanctuary, and we require access to the navigation charts for the throne core." Valis studied Jaden for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then she smiled, a thin, bloodless expression. "We will discuss your requests in the Chamber of Echoes. Come." The Chamber of Echoes was a circular amphitheater carved from black stone. The acoustics were perfect. A whisper in the center could be heard in the highest tier. The Council of Exiles sat on raised dais, looking down at Sira and Jaden. The debate had been raging for an hour. It was not going well. "You ask us to help you destroy the legacy of our people," an elderly counselor shouted, slamming his fist on the stone table. "You want to use the seed to lock the core forever? To ensure the Ilari never rise again? I want to ensure that Vrakir cannot use it to enslave the galaxy," Sira argued, her voice ringing clear. "Our time is over. We must accept that. We cannot rebuild on a foundation of tyranny. Tyranny is a matter of perspective," Valis said smoothly. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Jaden. "The seed is rare," Valis continued. "To destroy the lock is a waste. We have a unique opportunity here. The boy carries the genetic code of the first emperors. If we were to harvest that material, if we were to use him to sire a new generation of heirs, we could retake the throne. We could defeat the Vrakir and restore the dominion to its rightful glory. Proper glory." Jaden felt the blood drain from his face. It was exactly what Sira had warned him about. They did not want to kill him. They wanted to turn him into breeding stock. "I am standing right here," Jaden said, his voice cutting through the room. "Silence. Vessel." Valis snapped. "No," Jaden said, stepping forward. He ignored Sira's warning hand on his arm. "I am not a vessel. I am not a seed. My name is Jaden Rourke, and I am not interested in being your stud horse for a dead empire." Gasps echoed through the chamber. No one spoke to the council like that. "You are insolent," Valis said, her eyes narrowing. "You do not understand your purpose. You are biology. You are a tool." Sira stepped in front of him, her hand dropping to the hilt of her light blade. "He is a man," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous octave. And he is mine. Anyone who touches him dies. Valis stood up. Her expression was one of pity. You have been corrupted by your time among the lesser races. Siratal, you have forgotten who you are. You think this human is your equal? He is livestock, and we will not let you waste him. She made a subtle gesture with her hand. From the shadows behind the dais, 3 figures emerged. They were not guards. They were zealots, fanatical loyalists to the idea of the pure bloodline. They wore robes of crimson and carried vibro daggers that hummed with a lethal frequency. Seize the asset, Valis commanded. Restrain the princess. The zealots moved with terrifying speed. Sira drew her blade, the golden light illuminating the dark chamber. Back away. 2 of the zealots lunged for her. She parried, the clash of light against steel sparking violently. But the 3rd zealot, a lithe figure with a masked face, bypassed her. He went straight for Jaden. Jaden pulled the plasma pistol, but the zealot was too fast. A kick to his wrist sent the gun skittering across the stone floor. The zealot tackled him, driving him to the ground. Jaden struggled, punching and kicking, but the alien was stronger. A hand clamped around his throat, cutting off his air. He saw the vibro dagger raised high, aiming not to kill but to maim, to sever the tendons in his legs so he could not run. We will keep you comfortable, human, the zealot hissed. Suddenly, the weight was gone. There was a wet, sickening sound of tearing flesh. Jaden gasped, rolling onto his side. Sira stood over him. She had disengaged from the other 2 attackers, taking a shallow cut across her cheek to do it. She had driven her light blade through the chest of the zealot who had pinned Jaden. She kicked the body away. She was breathing hard, blood dripping from her face, her eyes glowing with a terrifying, primal rage. She turned to the council. She pointed her dripping blade at Valis. I said, he is mine, Sira screamed. The chamber fell into a stunned silence. Violence in the Chamber of Echoes was sacrilege. Murder was unheard of. Valis looked at the dead zealot, then at Sira. Her face twisted in fury. Kill them both, she ordered. Panic erupted. The other counselors shouted, some in protest, some in agreement. The remaining guards drew their weapons. Jaden scrambled to his feet, grabbing his pistol. Run! Sira yelled. They bolted toward the exit. Energy bolts sizzled past them, chipping the stone walls. Jaden fired back blindly, providing cover fire as Sira led the way. They burst out of the chamber into the main concourse. Alarms were blaring. The serene atmosphere of the sanctuary had shattered into chaos. Nesk! Jaden shouted into his comms. We need an extraction. Now! I am a little busy. Nesk's voice crackled back. It seems your friends are trying to impound my ship. Get the engines hot. We are coming in. They sprinted through the crystalline corridors. Sira was flagging, the exertion tearing at her shoulder wound. Jaden grabbed her good arm, pulling her along, just a little further. He panted. They reached the hangar bay. Nesk was engaged in a firefight with the dock security. He was using the ship's lower turret to lay down suppressing fire, pinning the Alari guards behind crates. Get on board! Nesk roared over the external speakers. Jaden and Sira sprinted up the ramp. Bolts of blue energy slammed into the hull around them. Sira stumbled, falling to one knee. Jaden scooped her up, ignoring the burn in his muscles, and threw them both into the airlock. Go! Jaden slammed the button. The ramp retracted. The copperhead surged forward, shearing off the docking clamps with a screech of tearing metal. Nesk punched the thrusters and they rocketed out of the bay, spinning wildly to avoid the station's defense turrets. They cleared the asteroid field in seconds, jumping to hyperspace before the sanctuary's interceptors could lock on. The silence returned. But this time it was the silence of exhaustion. Jaden sat on the floor of the cargo hold, his back against a crate. Sierra sat opposite him. She was cleaning the blood from her face. Her cheek was swollen, and her shoulder was bleeding again. She looked broken. The encounter with the council had stripped away her last hope of a peaceful resolution. Her own people, the ones she had idealized as the good Ilari, had turned on her. They were no better than the Vrakir. They were all monsters, consumed by the hunger for power. "We have nowhere left to go," Sierra whispered. "The Vrakir are hunting us. The exiles want to enslave you. Nesk cannot hide us forever." Jaden looked at her. He saw the despair threatening to swallow her whole. He stood up and walked over to her, kneeling down. "We have one place left," he said. Sierra looked up, her eyes wide. "No," she said, "not there." "The throne core," Jaden said firmly. "It is the only way. We go to the source. We found the vault. And we end this. It is suicide. Jaden, the core is a fortress, though it is guarded by the Vrakir main fleet. It is a planet-sized trap. And it is the only place where we can destroy the key," Jaden said. "We have to sneak in. We have to get to the interface. And I have to use my blood to shut it down. Permanently." Sierra shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "I cannot let you do that. If we go there, the temptation, the power, the system will try to bond with you. It will try to make you the emperor." "Let it try," Jaden said. "I am stubborn." He took her face in his hands. "Sierra, look at me. We are out of options. We run, and we die tired. Or we fight, and maybe, just maybe, we win." She looked at him, searching for any sign of hesitation. She found none. "Okay," she whispered, "to the core." The journey to the throne core took 2 days. It was a somber voyage. Nesk was quiet, sensing the gravity of their destination. He spent his time reinforcing the ship's shields and overcharging the engines. He knew this was a one-way trip for the Copperhead. On the final night, before they entered the core system, Jaden found Sierra in the observation blister. She was watching the stars streak by, wrapped in a blanket. He sat beside her. "You kept the recording," he said quietly. Sierra stiffened, then relaxed. She did not look at him. "I did." "Why did you not tell me?" Jaden asked. "Back on the moon, or on the station. Why did you let me think it was just duty because I was ashamed?" She admitted. "I was a princess of the blood. I was supposed to be above such things. And you? You were a human, a short-lived, fragile human. It felt selfish. To drag you into my war because I was lonely." She turned to him. The starlight illuminated the tears on her cheeks. "I told myself I was following the seed. I told myself I was protecting the galaxy. But that was a lie. Jaden." She took a ragged breath. "I was following you. Just you. I saw a man who was hurt by the world but refused to break. I saw a man who was kind when no one was watching. And I wanted to be near that fire. I wanted to know what it felt like to be chosen, not for my blood, but for myself." She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his chest. "I brought you to the edge of death because I could not let you go. I am so sorry." Jaden wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight against the cold of the void. "Don't be," he said, his voice thick with emotion. He lifted her chin so she had to look at him. "You saved me. Sierra, I was dead on that station. I was a ghost haunting my own life. You woke me up." He kissed her. It was not a kiss of desperation or hunger. It was a kiss of promise. A vow made in the dark between two souls who had found their match against the odds of the universe. "Whatever happens tomorrow," Jaden whispered against her lips, We do it together. Together, she echoed. The ship shuddered as it began the deceleration sequence. The warning lights in the blister turned red. Nesk's voice came over the intercom, grim and final. We are arriving. Welcome to the Throne Core, and may the Void have mercy on us because the Vrakir certainly won't. Through the viewport, the destination came into view. It was not a planet, it was a construct, a massive metallic sphere the size of a world, glowing with veins of pulsing golden energy. It hung in space like a mechanical god, surrounded by the swarming fleets of the Vrakir Armada. Jaden took Syrah's hand. Ready? He asked. Syrah drew a deep breath. Her eyes hardened. The princess was gone. The warrior was back. But this time, she was not fighting for an empire. She was fighting for him. Ready, she said. Jaden stood up and pulled her toward the cockpit. Then let's go break the throne. The copperhead did not fly so much as it fell with style, screaming through the flak-filled vacuum above the throne core. The ship shuddered violently, metal groaning in protest as plasma bolts from the Vrakir heavy cruisers hammered against the shields. Nesk Tal wrestled with the yoke, his reptilian lips pulled back in a rictus of concentration and terror. Shields are down to 12%, Nesk roared over the deafening cacophony of the hull breach alarms. I cannot hold this approach. Syrah, they are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at us. Get us to the northern pole, Syrah shouted from the co-pilot's seat, her fingers flying across the weapons console. The entrance to the vault is located at the thermal exhaust port of the primary conduit. It is the only way in. I know where it is, Nesk snapped, banking the freighter hard to the left to avoid a swarm of seeker missiles. I am just trying to figure out how to park without turning us into a smear of carbon. Jaden Rourke held onto the bulkhead behind them, his eyes fixed on the viewport. The throne core filled the sky, a monstrosity of engineering that defied logic. It was a planet made entirely of gold and circuitry, a Dyson sphere of such complexity that looking at it made his eyes ache. Trenches the size of canyons glowed with pulsating energy, and towers reached up like fingers trying to scratch the void. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was the heart of an empire that had eaten stars. We are going in hot, Nesk yelled. Brace for impact. The copperhead dove into the atmosphere of the machine world. There was no air, only layers of magnetic shielding and static discharge. Lightning, thick and violet, arced across the canopy. Nesk fired the retro thrusters, but the gravity well of the core was immense. They slammed onto a landing platform near the massive polar aperture, skidding across the metal plating for half a mile. Sparks showered the viewport like fireworks. The ship spun, slammed into a retention wall, and came to a grinding, screeching halt. The silence that followed was ringing and absolute. We are alive, Nesk wheezed, checking his console. Miraculously, the ramp! Jaden yelled, grabbing the satchel containing the DNA disruptor. He checked the plasma pistol at his hip. We have 5 minutes before those cruisers send ground troops. Syrah was already moving. She winced as she stood, her injured shoulder stiff, but her movements were fluid. She looked at Nesk. Keep the engines running. Nesk, we will be back. If you are not back in 20 minutes, Nesk said, pulling a heavy assault rifle from under his seat. I am going to assume you are dead, and I am going to loot your quarters. Jaden looked at the smuggler. Thank you, Nesk. For the credits. Kid. Just for the credits. Jaden and Syrah sprinted down the ramp and onto the surface of the throne core. The scale of the place was oppressive. They were 2 specks of dust on the surface of a machine god. Above them, the space battle raged, silent flashes of light marking the deaths of ships, The entrance to the vault was a massive triangular gate, sealed with ancient glyphs. Sira ran to the control interface. She placed her hand on the panel. "It will not open for me," she said, her voice tight. "My biosignature is flagged as exiled. It knows I am here." She looked at Jaden. "It is waiting for you." Jaden stepped forward. He felt a strange hum in his blood, a vibration that started in his marrow and echoed in his skull. The genetic code inside him, the seed, was reacting to the proximity of the source. He placed his hand on the cold, golden metal. The gate did not grind open. It dissolved. The metal simply turned into mist, revealing a long, illuminated corridor descending into the dark heart of the planet. "Stay close," Sira whispered, drawing her light blade. "The defenses here are not just physical. They are psychological. The core will try to protect itself." They ran into the dark. The descent was a blur of endless spiral ramps and suspended walkways over chasms of pure energy. They were deep underground now, miles beneath the surface. The air was sterile, recycled for thousands of years, smelling of ozone and dust. They encountered no guards, no drones. The silence was more unnerving than gunfire. "It wants us here," Jaden said, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. "It is inviting us in." "It wants you," Sira corrected. "To the core. I am just a biological contaminant." They reached the bottom, the vault heart. It was a spherical chamber, vast enough to hold a city. The walls were lined with millions of memory crystals, glowing with the accumulated knowledge of the Alari civilization. In the center of the room, suspended over a pit of white fire, was a single platform. On the platform stood a throne. It was not a chair. It was an interface, a construct of light and glass pulsing with a heartbeat that matched Jaden's own. "We made it." Jaden breathed. Sira stopped at the edge of the bridge leading to the platform. She looked at the throne with a mixture of hatred and fear. "This is it," she said. "The interface. You have to touch the receptor. When the system links with you, it will attempt to upload the succession protocols. That is when you inject the disruptor." She pointed to the satchel at Jaden's side. "The disruptor is a retrovirus. It will rewrite the command syntax of the core. It will tell the system that the royal bloodline is extinct. It will initiate a hard shutdown." Jaden nodded. He gripped the satchel. "Walk in, plug in, kill the Empire. Simple." He stepped onto the bridge. As soon as his foot touched the surface, the room changed. The white fire beneath the platform flared gold. A voice filled the chamber, not from speakers, but inside their heads. It was a voice of infinite weight, a chorus of 1,000 dead emperors. "The seed returns," the voice intoned. "The cycle closes." Jaden froze. The pressure in his head was immense. He felt memories that were not his own flooding his mind. Star charts, battle strategies, the blueprints of weapons that could crack moons. "Do not be afraid, child of Earth," the voice soothed. "You are the vessel. You are the restoration." Jaden forced himself to keep walking. He reached the platform. The throne hummed, beckoning him. "The galaxy burns in chaos," the voice whispered. "The Vrakir are children playing with fire. They lack vision. They lack the blood. Only you can stop them." Jaden stood before the interface. He reached into the satchel and pulled out the injector. It was a silver cylinder filled with a volatile blue liquid, Sira's masterpiece of sabotage. "Wait," the voice commanded. A hologram materialized above the throne. It showed the space battle raging above. It showed the Vrakir fleet decimating the Copperhead. It zoomed out to show the galaxy, 20 systems in turmoil, wars raging on 100 worlds. "You have the power to end this," the voice said. "Accept the succession. Interface with the core. In one heartbeat, you will control the entire Alari defense grid. You can disable the Verkeer ships. You can save your friends. You can bring peace to the galaxy. Jaden hesitated. The logic was seductive. Immediate safety. Immediate peace. He could save Nesk. He could save Sira. All he had to do was sit down. Jaden! Sira's voice cut through the hypnotic drone of the system. She was standing at the edge of the bridge, unable to cross the energy barrier that had sprung up. Jaden, do not listen to it. It is lying to you. It is not a lie, the voice countered. It is power. Why destroy what you can command? Why let the galaxy suffer when you can heal it? You are a fixer. Jaden Rourke, that is your nature. Fix this. Jaden looked at the injector in his hand. Then he looked at the throne. He could stop the war. He could ensure no one ever hunted Sira again. He could be the shield she needed. I can save us, Jaden whispered. I can stop the Verkeer right now. No, Sira screamed, slamming her hands against the invisible barrier. That is not saving us, Jaden. That is becoming them. Jaden turned to look at her. His eyes were glazing over, the golden light of the core reflecting in his irises. Sira, look at the fleet. Nesk is going to die. You are going to die. If I take the throne, I can freeze their weapons. I can order them to stand down. I can give you your life back. I do not want a life given to me by a tyrant, Sira shouted, tears streaming down her face. Even a benevolent tyrant is still a monster. If you sit on that throne, you are not fixing the system. You are perpetuating it. You are saying that control is better than freedom. She fell to her knees, sobbing. Please, Jaden, I fell in love with the man who fixed heaters for strangers. I fell in love with the man who refused to kill. Do not trade your soul for a crown. If you do this, I lost you. I lose the only thing that matters. Jaden looked at her. He saw the terror in her eyes. Not terror of dying, but terror of losing him to the darkness she had spent her life running from. She is weak, the core whispered. She does not understand the burden of leadership. Ignore her. Sit. Jaden looked back at the throne. The power was right there. It was intoxicating. It whispered to the part of him that had always felt powerless. The part of him that had been court-martialed for having a conscience. He stepped toward the interface. Sira screamed his name, a sound of pure heartbreak. Jaden stopped. He looked at the throne, then back at the woman kneeling on the bridge. He remembered the recording. I love him. Though I do not know if I should. He remembered the jungle moon, the way she looked at him, not as a tool, not as a savior, but as a man. If he sat down, he would save her body, but he would break her heart. He would become the very thing she despised. He would be powerful, and he would be alone. Jaden closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. The hum of the genetic code in his blood was deafening. Do you accept succession? The core demanded. Jaden opened his eyes. He looked at the hologram of the galaxy. I am a fixer, he said softly. He turned away from the throne. He walked back to the edge of the barrier where Sira was kneeling. Jaden? She whispered, looking up. He smiled. It was a sad, tired smile. But some things, he said, are too broken to be fixed. They just need to be scrapped. He reached through the barrier. It allowed his genetic signature to pass and grabbed Sira's face. He pulled her to him and kissed her. It was a fierce, desperate kiss, a rejection of destiny and an acceptance of mortality. I love you, he whispered against her lips. He turned back to the throne. What are you doing? The core shrieked. Do not turn away. Jaden raised the injector. I am resigning, he said. He slammed the injector into the primary receptor port of the interface. The blue liquid hissed as it entered the system. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the golden light of the chamber turned a violent, sick green. A scream tore through the air, a mechanical shriek of agony that shattered the memory crystals on the walls. The hologram flickered and died. Error, lineage corruption detected, critical failure, system purge initiated. The ground beneath them bucked violently. The white fire in the pit turned red and began to rise. Run! Jaden grabbed Syrah's hand. The barrier dropped. They turned and sprinted back across the bridge. The vault was screaming around them. Chunks of the ceiling, massive slabs of gold and obsidian began to fall. The gravity stabilizers failed, making the floor tilt at crazy angles. They scrambled up the spiral ramp. The air was filled with smoke and the smell of burning ozone. Self-destruct sequence active. The voice of the core announced, now broken and stuttering, total collapse in 60 seconds. They ran until their lungs burned. They ran as the world ended behind them. They burst out of the triangular gate onto the surface. The sky was falling. The magnetic atmosphere was collapsing, venting into space. The ground was cracking open, geysers of molten energy erupting into the void. "Nesk!" Jaden screamed into his comms. "I see you!" Nesk yelled back. The copperhead roared overhead, banking sharply. The ramp was down. Nesk brought the ship in for a suicide run, hovering 10 feet off the crumbling surface. "Jump!" Jaden and Syrah leaped. They hit the metal ramp hard, scrambling for purchase as the ship pitched violently. Jaden grabbed a strut and hauled Syrah up. They tumbled into the cargo hold just as Nesk punched the thrusters. The G-force slammed them against the back wall. The ship shot up, away from the surface, weaving through the debris of the imploding planet. Behind them, the throne core died. It did not explode outward, it collapsed inward. The massive golden sphere crumpled like tin foil, sucked into a singularity of its own making. The Vrakir fleet, caught in the gravity well of the implosion, was dragged in. Cruisers and fighters were pulled into the crushing dark, their engines flaring uselessly against the inevitable. Then a flash of white light and silence. The throne core was gone. The fleet was gone. There was nothing left but dust and the cold, indifferent stars. Jaden and Syrah lay on the floor of the cargo hold, panting, covered in sweat and grime. The ship was quiet now, humming steadily as Nesk set a course for deep space. Syrah sat up slowly. She looked at the empty space on the monitor where the Empire used to be. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with shock. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." She turned to look at him. Tears welled in her violet eyes, spilling over. "You destroyed everything," she said, her voice trembling. "The history, the technology, the legacy of my people. It is all gone." She looked at her hands, shaking. "You destroyed it all." "For me." Jaden sat up, wincing as his ribs protested. He reached out and took her hands in his. They were cold. "I did not destroy it for you, Syrah," he said gently. "I destroyed it for us." He looked her in the eye. "I told you, you are everything. An empire is just a thing. It can be rebuilt. But you are the only one in the galaxy." Syrah stared at him for a long moment. Then, a sob broke from her chest, and she threw herself into his arms. She buried her face in his neck, crying with the relief of a lifetime of burdens being lifted. Jaden held her, rocking her slowly as the ship carried them away from the graveyard of kings. Days later, or maybe weeks. Time was hard to track in the drift. They landed on a moon in the Sigma cluster. It was a quiet world, uninhabited, with silver grass and a sky dominated by a swirling purple nebula. It was beautiful and still. Nesk was repairing the hull, grumbling about the cost of the plating. But he had agreed to drop them here. He knew they needed a moment before figuring out what came next. Jaden stood on a ridge overlooking a valley of crystal formations. The air was crisp and cool. He heard footsteps behind him, soft, deliberate. He turned. Sira stood there. She was not wearing her armor. She wore simple clothes, a tunic and trousers Nesk had scavenged from his supplies. Her hair was loose, blowing in the gentle wind. She held something in her hand. It was the heavy golden insignia of the Alari royal house, the brooch she had worn on her cloak since the day they met. She looked at it for a long time. The metal caught the light of the nebula, gleaming with a history of blood and power. Then, she pulled her arm back and threw it. The insignia sailed through the air, glinting once, before disappearing into the deep chasm below the ridge. It made no sound when it hit the bottom. Sira took a deep breath. Her shoulders dropped. She looked lighter, as if gravity had released its hold on her. "No more empires," she said softly. "No more princesses. No more destiny." She walked over to Jaden. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and bright. "Just us." Jaden smiled. He reached out and tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "Just us sounds perfect," he said. Sira wrapped her arms around his waist, resting her head on his chest. "So, Jaden Rourke," she murmured. "The galaxy is big. The Vrakir are scattered. The exiles are hiding. We are free. Where do we go?" Jaden looked up at the sky. The stars were endless, a canvas of infinite possibility. He thought about Trellix 7, about the cramped quarters and the loneliness. He thought about the chase, the fear, and the choice he had made in the heart of the machine god. He looked down at the woman who had crashed into his life and saved him by letting him save her. "You followed me for weeks." "Princess," he said, his grin crooked and warm. "I figure it is my turn. I will follow you anywhere." Sira laughed, a sound that was pure joy. She pulled his face down to hers. "Then let's get lost," she whispered. They kissed under the strange light of the alien moon, two fugitives in a galaxy that no longer owned them, ready to disappear into the starlight, leaving no map behind.